Hi folks, my name is Don Cooper and I'm an abolitionist. One of the tenets of abolition is that it is the obligation of the church, that is, that abolishing abortion, leading the charge to end the slaughter of preborn human beings in our land, ought to be led by Christians, the people who follow Jesus Christ, the people who claim His name and call Him Lord, that the people who worship the God who is the author of justice and mercy, whose very character is justice and mercy, that the same God who is the defender of the fatherless, who is on the side of the oppressed, who tells His people to imitate Him and to be the ones who plead the cause for the widow, that uphold justice and mercy, that those people ought to be the ones who are leading the charge to end abortion. And so with this obligation of the church, it comes this effort to exhort other Christians to love their neighbor as themselves, to care for the least of these, to follow this commandment, to follow these commandments of God, to love your neighbor as yourself. And when we look around in the churches today in America, we see that there is obviously a great neglect of this when it comes to the unborn. And therefore we see that there's a call for us to repent of our apathy, to turn from our old way of ignoring the plight of the unborn and agree with God that not only is abortion a heinous, horrible act of violence against a human being made in God's image, not only is it a heinous evil, child sacrifice, but that ignoring it is also a heinous evil. That passing by on the other side of the road is a heinous evil, and that we are guilty of that in America. And so one of the calls or the duties of an abolitionist is to go out and proclaim this truth, proclaim the truth of not only that abortion is a sin, but ignoring your neighbor is a sin, and that Christians are not to do this. So this is something that will be coming up more and more as time goes on, this topic. And I know that here locally in the Portland, Vancouver area, myself and some other abolitionists have been talking for a long time about doing more deliberate and direct activities that and would be interpreted probably as contentious, although we're not intending them to be intentionally incendiary or unnecessarily offensive, but they will probably be interpreted as that as we take some different steps to try and wake up our brothers and sisters in Christ to this reality that our neighbor's being slaughtered just down the road from our churches, and we're just driving by and ignoring this. And so I wanted to make one of probably what would be several videos and statements about this as we start to shift gears in this area. And one is that one important point that I want to make with this is that God is the same. We know we say this, and in fact the scriptures say this, and we're happy to kind of repeat it, that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That He's immutable. He hasn't changed. His character hasn't changed. What He desires has not changed. What is good, what He calls good and what He calls evil has not changed. And so when we look at, say, the scriptures in the Old Testament, in the New Testament as well, but talking specifically about the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all of the minor prophets too, we see a repeated theme. We see a call that God is calling His people to repent of ignoring justice, ignoring mercy, to repent of even participating in it. And it's a plead over and over. And He even talks about how his people worship him with their mouth, but their hearts are far from him. He says in Amos chapter 5 that their music, he can't stand it. He says, I don't care how lovely your music is. I don't want to hear it. What I want to see is a torrent of doing good, of doing justice. That's what he says. And God hasn't changed. He's the same then as he is now. And so as we look at what's going on in our land and the Christian organizations or the church sort of business in our land, of all these buildings and all the activities that go on, that they're ignoring the plight of the unborn, and they're doing the very thing that God was condemning in the Old Testament, the very things that God has intentionally laid out and made clear to us in his word, this theme over and over again, that he cares about the shedding of innocent blood, that he hates it, and that we are to intervene. Even in the book of Jeremiah and in Ezekiel chapter 4, where God is telling Ezekiel that you are a watchman, and that if you don't go and warn my people about this evil, about what's going on, about if you don't go and call them to repent, that their blood, the blood of these sinful people, that their actions is on your hands. That he's crediting some culpability and some complicity of Ezekiel, the prophet, who wasn't doing these evil things, but by the very fact that that if he was going to deny and not go and warn the people, to be a warning to them, that there was some guilt that he would bear. And these are God's words, this isn't some interpretation. You can go read it. So is God the same then as he is now? I think he is. And as we're called to go do these things, to proclaim the truth, to proclaim it boldly, proclaim it in love, that there's a certain obligation we have in this, that we have to do this, and in order to be obedient. So this is something that's going to come up over and over, and I wanted to share that so that perhaps it could head off some misunderstanding or misinformation that could come about, because this is one of those areas that it seems like it's very easy for people to come up with ideas or stories that are not true related to why we go to Christians, why we would go to church buildings on Sunday morning and exhort Christians, why we would say it is the obligation of the church, and not because we find it as our passion to fight abortion, not because we think that our cause is somehow more important than all others, and that therefore you should be as excited about it. We're going to pressure you to care about this the way we do. No, we're looking at, this is an argument from God's Word. This is an argument from God's Word and applying it to the reality of today and what is happening in our land. That the practice of child sacrifice has been going on for almost 43 years, that close to 60 million, probably more, estimated have been murdered in America alone, and that this is happening in the midst of a place where it's supposed to be a Christian nation, where we have church buildings on almost every corner, and people who claim the name of Christ, who are part of these church organizations, and yet this practice of child sacrifice goes on almost completely unopposed. And that might sound like an exaggeration or hyperbole, and that is probably a video for another time. But I think in our most honest moments, when we sit and look at the practice of human sacrifice of babies, innocent children, parents taking their kids to these places to be slaughtered, to be murdered, to be tortured to death, and they're doing this by the thousands every day. And what is the opposition? Do we see some proportional opposition to this? Some real zealous, God-fearing efforts to oppose such a heinous act in our backyard? In our most honest moments, do we really think that the church organizations in America are doing that? Do we think that Christians, people who claim the name of Christ, are really doing that? And so we think there is a legitimate reason and sufficient evidence to say that we need to make this call and plea to the people who claim the name of Christ that it's time for us to repent of our apathy, to put aside our indifference, to ask God to break our hearts about the injustice happening to our unborn neighbors, and to agree with Him, to agree with God that this is a horrible, horrible evil, and we ought to oppose it. We ought to resist it. We ought to storm the gates of hell to stop these acts, and to call people to repent and turn to Christ, to turn to the God who made them and the God who saved them, the God who is their rightful owner, and to be that light that is shining in this dark, dark place, because that's who we're called to be. That's who God desires us to be. That's who He made us to be. So with that, I will end this video, and thanks for listening, and keep up the good fight.